Welcome back, everybody. Let's look at a few monsters from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. So right up here at this, we start with something looks like called Loup Garou. And when I saw this name, I said, well, this has got to be something unusual. It must mean something in another language. And when you look at the first word here, the loup part, it basically means circle, and the grou is a French word for werewolf. So maybe in that culture, this is a common name for werewolves. And maybe the circle part refers to how the lycanthropy just keeps being passed on. And as long as the original individual who passed it's alive, the other ones can't get rid of it. They're sort of stuck in that loop right there. So they tell you this creature possesses a strain of lycanthropy more virulent than those carried by common werewolves. This is basically the super werewolf, is exactly what this guy is. Aside from being deadlier than their werewolf cousins, Loup Garou aggressively spread the plague of lycanthropy. Only through the death of one might those afflicted by it escape their curse. So obviously it's a shapeshifter, shape changer right here, medium size monstrosity. Decent armor class right there, 16, like you see most with the lycanthropes. And look at these hit points, 170. This is a 20 hit dice monster right here. Look at these speeds, 40 in hybrid, 50 in direwolf. Good luck trying to outrun that thing right there. Look at these stats, solid all the way across right there, no real weaknesses. So you can see they got their saving throws, pretty good at stealth, +9 right there, condition immunities. And I've noticed right here with the dark vision, something they're starting to do is really up the dark vision to 120 feet on a lot of things. You know, traditionally it was more like 60, but for some reason now it's being up to 120. I guess they don't know what else to do with them. Look at the passive perception on this guy. Good luck slipping up on one of these right here. Now look at this CR rating right here, a CR of 13. Now that's the same you see with a vampire, a Rakshasa, a young shadow dragon, an adult white dragon, or adult brass dragon. So these things right here are really tough. This is not like your usual werewolf. So they got something right here called Blood Frenzy, where they have advantage on attack rolls against any creature that doesn't have all its hit points. I guess it's sort of like a feeding frenzy you see with sharks. Once they detect blood, they sort of go crazy. If they got advantage on all attack rolls, they're going to be tough. They got legendary resistance, so they'll just make any 2 saves they feel like right there. Regeneration 10 hit points. I believe that's the same as a vampire there, so that's really good regeneration. Multi-attack, as you can see, depends on what form they're in as to what they're going to take. They got a bite. And something else you see going on right here with lycanthropes, undead, or whatever, you'll see their usual damage, and now they're wanting to add necrotic. And look at that, an extra 4d6. That's a big extra. And of course, if they get bit by this thing, they're going to have to make a con save. Now, this is pretty high. They get fighter types and such and make it pretty well. But you think about a lot of characters, they don't have a high DC. They may not make a 17, or they're going to be infected. So there's the claws. Notice they can also knock an individual prone. They don't make a good saving throw right there. Long sword attack down here if they're in the humanoid form and whatever. And of course they can shapeshift. There's their legendary action, swipe, mauling, pounce right there, and bite. So what else they got on this creature? A humanoid who succumbs to the lycanthropy becomes a werewolf. This form can't be removed until the Loup Garou that afflicted the curse can't be removed as long as the individual lives. Once the individual is slain, a remove curse spell can be cast on the night of a full moon on any afflicted werewolf it created and will force the target to then make a DC 17 con saving throw. On a success, the curse is broken and the target returns to normal with 3 levels of exhaustion. If they fail the saving throw, then they can't make it again for 1 month. Now, this has been long coming right here with the lycanthropes. I've heard a lot of talk about how it's just too easy to get rid of it. You know, just load the spell curse or whatever. So now they're really up in the game. They're going to make it where it's going to be a lot more difficult. I guarantee you, down the road, whether it's further updates with 5th edition or maybe going into 6th, this is going to be standard right here with lycanthropes. So just watch out for it. So there's your super werewolf right there, pretty tough. Then we got something right here, looks like pronounced Necricor, right? This is some type of undead here. A Necrocor is a being of living blood. Well, if you look at undead, you got just about everything else out there wandering around, whether it's just a hand or a brain in a jar or anything else. I guess it was just a matter of time before the blood itself came its own undead being. Formed from the ichor of evil gods or the sludge in the crypts of failed liches. So sort of think of it as lich blood. That's a good way there. Despite the loss of a solid physical form, these foul creatures retain their terrible intellects and aspire to be, looks like aspire to their megalomaniac goals. The first of which involves regaining a body. So if one of these is encountered, if at all possible as DM, should be some story about this thing trying to regain a body in one way or another. To do this, they seek servants to exact their will, coercing even the most stubborn potential minions by turning their own blood against them. Necrocores prove exceptionally difficult to destroy since they leave a trace of their essence within the veins of every creature they've controlled and can regenerate themselves from those creatures' blood. So even, I guess, if the primary undead is killed, if they've infected anything else, they're just going to come right back from it. So not surprising there. Unable to extinguish their horrific unlife, virtuous face and vigilant organizations seal these vicious horrors in magically warded prisons. So it's sort of like the jar that the brain in a jar is in, if you've seen that one recently. That's from the Icewind Dale books, first place I saw it. As ages pass, though, the knowledge of what these prisons contain and where some lie have been lost. So somebody will imprison one of these things, and over time, people just sort of forget about it. And every imprisoned Necricor understands that its captivity might be lengthy, but time is of little consequence to the ageless. If you're not going to age, well, who cares how long you sit in this jar? Eventually, somebody will get around to letting you loose. Necrocores that escape their imprisonment have the statistics presented here. So low armor class, 67 hit points, slow movement speed. Con and intelligence look to be their big scores up there. And condition immunities are what you would expect from an undead. Look at this blind sight, 120 feet. Again, they're kind of moving away from the 60 to the 120 right there. So there's telepathy, 120 feet. They're going to need that right there if they're going to speak. Legendary resistance twice a day. Boy, they're really liking to add that to new creatures now. Rejuvenation. Unless its lifeless remains are splashed with holy water or placed in a vessel under the effects of the Hallow spell, the destroyed Necricor reforms in 1d10 days, regaining all its hit points and appearing in the place it died or in the nearest unoccupied space. So you better start carrying some holy water with you right there. So they can spider climb. Now, I'm assuming they mean that whenever they're not inside this container. I guess they look like a blob of blood running up a wall right there. And of course, like other undead, they don't need to feed and sleep, stuff like that. Looks like they attack with a pseudopod, sort of again like some type of jelly. So we're starting to see some of the jelly-like characteristics from individuals from the monster manual. So there's the hit doing necrotic damage. And look at this. Somebody doesn't make a DC 14 con save, they're also going to be paralyzed. A nice little extra to add to it. Looks like they can shoot a necrotic bolt right there. And then we see this blood puppeteering. The Necricor targets a creature it can see within 5 feet of it that's missing any of its hit points, right? So they can't be at 100% health. If the target isn't a construct or undead, has to succeed on a DC 14 con saving throw, or the Necricor enters the target space and attaches itself to the target for 1 minute. I guess since the individual has to be damaged, they're entering through open wounds. That's how I'd play it up, reading it out as the DM. While attached, the Necricor takes only half damage dealt to it rounded down, and the target takes the remaining. So it's all over an individual. So when you hit this undead, you're hitting the individual at the same time. We've seen there's some other individual creatures that wrap around someone. The Necricor can attach to only one creature at a time. The attached Necricor can telepathically control the target's move, action, or both. When controlled this way, the target can take only the attack action, which the Necricor will choose, or the dash action. The attached target can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turn, detaching from it and forcing it to move in the nearest unoccupied space. So these are pretty nasty little undead. They're really getting an imagination right here when they come up with what these things can do. If you look at the rejuvenation over here, you'll need some holy water. Spider climbing. Imagine this thing just dropping down off a ceiling on somebody's head, wrapping all around them. Maybe somebody like your barbarian all of a sudden is controlled by this thing and starts to attack the party. Pretty nasty right there. Next we have something called Nosferatu. Now we've probably all heard before this word is synonymous with vampire. It's actually a Romanian word, and I believe that's exactly what it means. Vicious undead hunters. Nosferatu possess the endless thirst of vampires, but none of their grace. So these are sort of like the vicious, more crazed version of the vampire. For them, existence is nothing more than an everlasting string of cold, desperate nights, punctuated by crimson splashes of momentary warmth and lucidity. These joys are fleeting as their blood addiction can never be quelled. So they're like drug addicts for blood. Nosferatu feed on anything with blood, so it's not just going to go after the humans and elves and so on. Heaps of mutilated rats in stables turned into slaughterhouses are typical first signs of their predation. When the sun interrupts their hunts, Nosferatu retreat to favored ruins, sewers, or caves, caring nothing for their lair's comfort. Rather than retiring to crypts, they seek filthy or inaccessible fissures, places any living soul would avoid. So look at this. They like to get into really hidden places and eat rats. Sewer is going to be a great place to find these right here. Go into the cities, any large one, you ought to find these there. For a few moments after feeding, Nosferatu are lucid and capable of considering more than their next meal. So right after they feed, I would say they sort of resort back to their normal self, what they were before. I would, as DM, describe their appearance as changing, and maybe individuals could actually talk to them without them being crazed for a short amount of time, maybe a few turns, and get some information from one of them, maybe like whoever originally turned them. In these instances, Nosferatu recollect glimpses of what they once were. Beings who knew pride, intention, a world beyond the shadows. So have the characters be able to speak to them like any other creature at this time. They might even momentarily be convinced to converse with other creatures. There you go. However, those who talk with Nosferatu typically find them selfish, duplicitous creatures whose memories are faded and whose basic respect for life is long dead. So they're not going to be nice either way. So pretty good armor class of 17, 85 hit points, not bad, speed of 40, they're going to be quick. Look at the stats right here, 20 strength, 18 dex, 21 con, and a wisdom of 17. And how's this thing got a charisma of 14 right here? I never got that right there. Does that look like something that's have high charisma to you? It's pretty good stealth, plus 10. Can't be charmed or frightened. And there you go, 120 feet on the dark vision. Good passive perception right there. So there you see the regeneration. They're loving to put that 10 hit point regeneration in undead and things like those, lycanthropes and whatever. Got the spider climb here. Sunlight hypersensitivity. Look at that. Really susceptible to radiant damage. That's going to be a key to them when you want to get rid of them. Multi-attack. There's their claw attack down there. Up here we got a bite. And notice how the bite doesn't just have the usual piercing, but again, they're getting where they like to add necrotic damage. I don't know what the deal is with adding the necrotic damage these days, but that's becoming a thing. If the target is missing any of its hit points, it instead takes 11. Looks like instead of 2d6, if they're missing any hit points, it becomes 2d10. The target's hit point maximum is reduced by an amount equal to the necrotic damage, right, which we see right here. And the Nosferatu regains hit points equal. I guess you're supposed to assume they're sucking blood out of the individual when they bite, or maybe they're taking a big bite of meat out of them and they're eating it, but it's giving them heals at the same time it's doing damage. The reduction lasts until the target finishes a long rest. The target dies if its hit point maximum is reduced to 0. Now, I don't like this. The reduction lasts until a long rest. Those of you who are familiar with old original first edition rules and such, Undead did crazy, horrible things. Like they would actually drain the character levels from them. They could take a fighter down from level 6 or 8 down to 0 in no time and turn them into an undead. They got away from this and made characters much more survivable over the different editions, and I thought that was a great idea. And now for some reason they're bringing back some of these crazy harmful effects. If you can't get healed and such, how are you supposed to stay in combat? This, I think, is going to take away from the game. I don't think players are going to like it. So try it out for yourself, see how it works. So here a humanoid slain in this way and then buried in the ground rises as a Nosferatu in 1 to 10 days. So they can't just be slain by one of these creatures right here. Somebody'd have to bury them too. I guess maybe these Nosferatu do that themselves also. It doesn't say, but you could always have them do it as DM. That would increase their numbers. Blood Disgorge. Looks like it has a recharge of a 1 in 3, so on a 5 or a 6 right there. The Nosferatu vomits blood in a 15-foot cone. Just imagine seeing that. Each creature in that area must make a DC 16 con saving throw. That's pretty high. On a failed save, a creature will take 48 necrotic damage. Here we go with the necrotic damage again. You know, it's got to where, quite a few things for us players, barbarians and such, could have resistance to a lot of damages, but not necrotics. I think that's why they're throwing this one in. And it can't regain hit points for 1 minute. So this thing vomits on you or claws you, bites you, something else like this. All of a sudden you can't regain hit points. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage with no additional effects. I do not like these specials. I like the blood vomiting right here. That's pretty cool. But getting where individuals can't heal themselves, I think that's a bad way to go with all this. Alright, so that's a few very interesting creatures from Van Richten and Ravenloft right here. Tell me what you think about those. Maybe some additions or subtractions ought to be taken from these right here in some way. Let me know if you think they deserve some changes. Until next time, good luck and good gaming.